So welcome everyone. We want to thank you for joining us on Saturday morning to learn more about this topic of emotional regulation and mental well-being. And so my name is Mace Imad. I'm a faculty member in the biology department at Pima Community College. And with me here are my colleagues, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And we'll start with Corey.
Hi, good morning. My name is Corey Leonetti. I am also a biology faculty member at Pima. I teach microbiology, so I'll be here to answer any questions that may happen to come up at the end regarding COVID-19 or the virus that's associated with it.
Jackie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jackie Allen. I'm the Director of Online Student Success, and I'm helping today with fielding questions through the chat, and then also if any students have questions about technology or the transition.
Thank you. Delisa.
Good morning. My name is Delisa Siddall. I'm a counselor here at Pima Community College, and I want to provide you with resources, community and local resources, and also resources nationally at the end of the presentation.
Thank you. So what we're going to go over today, first of all, I want to start by saying, so what your window on your computer or your tablet or your phone is going to look something like this. And at the bottom here where I'm pointing to, there is a chat icon which you can click on. You can either introduce yourself or you could ask questions. And when we read your questions, we won't mention your name. This will remain anonymous and we will just be able to address them. Another point is if you want to address the panelist only, that's us, you could just select the panelist. If you want to ask your question and you want your fellow students to see the question, then you want to select panelists and attendees. This is being recorded. You will receive the recording along with the slides that we will be showing today. So we recognize that these are unprecedented times and a lot of us are feeling stress and anxiety and even trauma. And we recognize that in order for us to be able to regulate our response to what is going on, we need to really understand what is going on. And so for this reason, we wanted to speak with you about what is really happening when we experience stress or anxiety and traumatic experiences, and what are some of the ways we could do to regulate our emotional response and also to help us continue learning. The beginning part of the presentation is going to provide individual resources, and so things we could do on an individual basis. And then the second part of the presentation is going to provide external resources. What can the school help you with? What about the community? And there are some national also organizations. If you have any questions, you may email me. Here is my email. This is my Twitter. And I'm also going to have the emails of my colleagues at the end. And so you could email any of us. So we want to start with, and we don't have that many participants this morning, and some people will be joining us late, but we wanted to start by just taking a pulse to see how you are feeling. And what I mean by this minute right now, how are you feeling? Are you excited? Are you anxious? Are you scared? Are you numb? And so if you feel comfortable, if you could just write in the chat how you are feeling. So we already have a student who says that they feel stressed for themselves and the whole family. And we recognize that is a very normal response. Like I said, a lot of us are feeling stress. I feel this sense of anxiety also, and like what we want to do, we want to go over, well, what are some of the things we could do? And so, perfect. So what we want to go over today is the following. We want to talk very briefly about the physiological impact of stress and trauma. What I mean by this is when the brain is going to experience something stressful, what will it do? And how that's going to impact our body and how that's going to impact our ability to learn. We then want to go over some of the tools that we've come up with to help regulate our emotional response and to help us continue to learn. And then finally, we will go over resources, free, local, and national resources to help you deal with the anxiety and the stress and that you're going through. So let's begin. So our brains have this incredible capacity to always be screening the environment because it's trying to see if there are any risks or any threats. So our brain is concerned with our survivability. When it encounters something that is not risky and it's going to offer reward, that's going to do what? It's going to engage. And when it encounters something risky, it will disengage, it will run away, it will freeze. And again, this is something good because it's helping us remain alive. It's helping us with our survivability. And this is happening all the time, whether we are conscious of it or not conscious of it. So for example, when I tell students, when a student says, I can't do math, right? A lot of that is subconscious, right? And what I mean by that is that at one point in your educational journey, you took math and you didn't do well in math and you failed math. And then you studied again and you didn't do well. And this creates some kind of negative experience for you because you study and you don't do well. And that's very stressful. So the next time your brain encounters some kind of mathematical formula, you preemptively, or rather your brain preemptively decides, I can't do math. And you're subconscious of that, right? So the brain structures that we want to consider today are the following. We're going to look at the hypothalamus, we're going to look at the amygdala, we will look at the hippocampus and the frontal cortex. Those are the structures that are important for today's discussion. Now let's take a look. And the way we're going to talk about it, we're going to talk about the emotional brain and we're going to talk about the rational brain and why they're so intimately dependent on one another. And when the balance between the two is disrupted, then what happens? We experience this emotional anxiety, if you will. All right. So when we look at the emotional brain, the structures that we're going to pay attention to today are the following. The hypothalamus. Hypothalamus help us regulate our hormones. This is the part of the brain that tells the other part, the pituitary, the adrenal, our thyroid to release hormones or to stop releasing hormones. We have the amygdala. The amygdala is a tiny yet powerful structure that's helping us with fear, process fear. It's really part of our survival that's really important. And so when the amygdala senses, whether it's real or not, when the amygdala senses a threat, then it starts, the neurons in that part of the brain starts activating, starts firing, we call them, right? Because they're trying to tell us that there is a threat. This is also part of the brain that deals with anger and with aggression. And then finally, the part of the brain that we're going to consider today is the hippocampus. And so the hippocampus is this beautiful structure that helps us learn and remember. We call it consolidating the memory. We store long-term memory because of this structure. Now, when we look at the rational part of the brain, one of the parts we're going to look at today is this prefrontal cortex, the frontal cortex and the prefrontal cortex, which really helps us with making decisions, helps us pay attention, and helps us learn. And so I joke with some of my colleagues and my students, and I say that I say that the amygdala is the part of the brain that tells us, I need to get all the toilet paper, otherwise my butt will be abandoned. And the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that helps us say, I don't need to get all the toilet paper. I just need to stock up for a month, but not for a year. When we make decisions, it's important to note that reason and decision making, they depend on conscious and subconscious processes. So what that means is I don't just make decisions willy-nilly. When my brain is making a decision, it's really paying attention to my emotions, it's paying attention to memory, it's paying attention to attention, right? And so what this means is that when we make decisions, our decisions are also dependent on the emotional brain, those three structures. And so this goes line in line with what neurologists and neuroscientists have been talking about, that really we feel first, then we assign meaning. And so this limbic system, which is the emotional part of the brain, is active all the time. And any sensory information that's coming to us, it's being processed at the level of the limbic, the emotional brain, and then it goes to the rational brain. And this is what I think beautifully was coined by or explained by neuroscientist and neurologist Antonio Damasio, who works with patients that have emotional distress and neurological disorder. And he says that we are not thinking machines that feel. Rather, we are feeling machines that think. And what he's really saying is that in order for us to think, we really have to pay attention to our emotions. So in a way, it goes back to we feel first, then we think. So, and this process is really when we are at balance, or when we are at an equilibrium, if you will, then the rational brain and the emotional brain are working very beautifully symbiotically, right? And the problem is when we lack information. So when we lack information, when we are uncertain, our brains are going to shift control to the limbic system. What this means is if I don't know what's going to happen, right? If I don't know what is happening, then my brain is not comfortable with ambiguity. It is not comfortable with unknowns. It is not comfortable with uncertainty. And so starts to fill the gap. And it's going to fill the gap by activating our emotional brain. And this is not really good because a lot of times we go into, again, remember, our emotional brain is helping us stay alive. It's our ability to survive. And so how this relates to what's happening with the COVID-19, there's a lot of uncertainties. Some people, a lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people don't know if they're going to have jobs. You don't know what's going to happen with the school. You don't know what's going to happen. There are so many unknowns, and the unknowns are remaining. So we go to bed, we don't know what's going on. We wake up, we don't know what's going on. And so it's kind of like we're put in a position where we have to fill all these unknowns. And what I want to speak with you today is, while we're not going to be able to have all the answers, we can, in a way, reestablish positive learning experience that we allow the brain to focus on those. So we want information, and we want good vetted information to help us reason critically. Let's talk about stress and trauma. So we will begin by talking about what is stress, and it's in its most basic definition. Stress is anything that life brings our way that's going to have the potential to upset our balance, our daily balance, right? And we could have good stress or bad stress. When you're studying for an exam, right, before this COVID-19, when you're studying for an exam or preparing for a marathon, this is beneficial. Why? Because stress is going to help release certain hormones that will help increase our blood glucose, blood sugar, that's going to help us, for example, have energy. But if we have a lot of stress, chronic stress, traumatic stress, that's harmful. So losing a job, for example, is going to create a lot of unknowns. You don't know if you're going to be able to pay the bills. You don't know if you're going to be able to support your family, etc. So that becomes very harmful stress because it increases the level of hormones that we release, which are not good for our body. So let's look at trauma. So Robert Scare is a traumatologist. He is a neurologist. He's somebody that studies psychological trauma. And he says that trauma is any negative event that occurs and it puts us in a position of relative helplessness. What this means, trauma is something negative, right? And not just something negative, but it's going to take away our control. It's going to put us in a position of helplessness. And so when somebody is raped or abused, they are in a position of helplessness, and it's very negative. We call that traumatic. A car accident is traumatic. A global pandemic is traumatic, right? And so what you're feeling, if you're feeling numb or if you're feeling scared or if you're feeling anxious, all of those are because you're experiencing traumatic experience. And I had someone say to me, I don't understand why I'm feeling this way because I haven't lost my job. Well, that's good. You haven't lost your job, but it doesn't mean that your body and your mind doesn't recognize that globally there is this pandemic, and we don't know what it's going to mean in 4 months or so. So traumatic experiences, therefore, are always going to be stressful, and it's not the type of stress that's good. It's the stress that's going to have a lot of negative impact on our body, and that's why sometimes I will call this traumatic stress. Okay, good. So let's see. I want to remind you that we started by talking about that the brain is interested in keeping us alive. And so it's really this, our instinct to survive is going to define our reaction to trauma, regardless of our conscious awareness of this. And what I want to go over today is there are things we could do that can help us be, that can bring to the forefront our conscious awareness that we're not in an immediate threat, right? And so it can help our brain relax. Take home message number one, trauma is going to cause stress hormones to be released, and it's going to send us to this biological fight or flight response. So let's look at this biological fight or flight response, which is important for our survival. So when we go into the fight or flight, our pupil are going to dilate because we want to get more light into them so you could be able to look out for danger. We're going to have a lot of breathing. Our breathing rate is going to go up. Our heart rate is going to go up. We don't really produce a lot of saliva. Talked about the heart rate. We're not going to really be doing much digestion. Our muscles become tense, trembling. It's a state of high alertness, right? We either want to fight the danger or flee from the danger. We are really taking action as opposed to sitting down and thinking. We don't think clearly. We have extreme thoughts. Either I'm going to pass this quiz that's worth 10 points out, or I'm going to flunk and my life will be over, right? We don't really think clearly. We're very hypervigilant. We're constantly looking for threats. We become paranoid. We have intense anxiety. It's going to disrupt our sleep. It drives us to, we just want to take action right away. So again, this is really important. This is an important mechanism, because when we are hiking and someone says to you that there is a bear, you want to be able to run, right? The problem becomes if this becomes chronic, if we are in fight or flight all the time, this is a disaster. Now, why is it a disaster? Well, because it's costing our body a lot of energy, right? And it's increasing the level of hormones, which normally we don't want them to be in high level. And I'll talk about one in particular. So what this means is the way we deal with trauma is that we go into the fight or flight. And this fight or flight is going to manifest itself in a variety of cognitive and behavioral manifestation. And so, for example, when we experience trauma, some of us will feel this state of hopelessness, or we can't concentrate, we have insomnia. Some of us are feeling numb. We're not really interested or motivated, very irritable. We snap very easily. Some of us are maybe even feeling depressed and dissociating from others. Talked about hypervigilance. We don't really remember the simplest things. We engage in self-destructive behavior. We go to the same boyfriend that was not nice to us. Some people will start drinking or engaging in substance abuse. Eating disorder, people stop eating or eat too much. There's chronic, people have been saying that they have headaches all the time. Everything feels overwhelming. You get up in the morning and your roommate says to you, good morning, and you feel overwhelmed. You don't want to answer. There's panic attacks, shame, startled, and nightmares, and so on. And those are all typical response to traumatic experiences. And so, and the reason for that, I'm gonna do a little bit of neuroendocrine here. When we experience traumatic stress, when your brain, remember, which is constantly scanning the environment to sense if there is danger, when it experiences traumatic stress, what happens is that it's going to, that sensory experience is going to tell your amygdala, which is going to talk to your hypothalamus, which is going to talk to your pituitary, which talks to your adrenal cortex, and it says, okay, there is danger, release cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that's good in small amount, but in a large amount, it's not. And the reason for that, for example, here, it's going to mess up with our circadian rhythm. When it messes up with our circadian rhythm, we have sleep disturbances. We sleep too much. We don't sleep enough. We wake up in the middle of the night. We're sleepy during the day. We don't get enough, we don't get deep sleep. This is not good for the body, because what happens when we sleep, in a way, the body is, it's a huge part of the immune system, right? The brain is like resetting the system. It's getting rid of things that we don't need to store. It is helping us remain balanced. So sleep is really, really critical. One that is disrupted because of cortisol. Cortisol is also going to really increase a process of inflammation. And this right here is part of the immune system. And we want inflammation, but we want it when we're injured. We want it when there is an infection. We don't want chronic inflammation, because chronic inflammation results in, or it causes diseases, right? Okay, so when that happens, one of the things that we're going to see is that inflammation is going to cause brain cells to destruct. And that is going to result in, we feel foggy, we can't remember, and it could even lead to neurological dysfunction. And I don't want to scare you here. You know, this is biology, but what is important is the tools that we're going to share with you is that we could mitigate this, right? And the way we could mitigate this is at the level of stress right here, right? So we could tell the brain to calm down, right? I could negotiate with my brain, if you will. So the take-home message from this then is that if we have too much stress hormone, it could lead to hippocampal cells being disrupted, and that's going to prevent us from being able to learn and remember. It can also lead to the prefrontal cortical neurons being destroyed. That's going to prevent us from making good decisions. Interestingly, it's also going to amplify the activity, so it's going to activate the amygdala cells, and that is going to keep us in the fight or flight, which we said we don't want to stay in for a long time. Okay, so the take-home message from this is that if we experience traumatic stress, it leads to high level of stress hormones that's going to send us into the flight or flight. And that, among other things, it will impair our ability to make decisions, to learn, and to remember. And so the question is, what happens when that takes place? Well, when it comes to learning, decision-making, and remembering, you may be having a hard time as a student keeping track of changes in your classes. And it could be some little changes, right? And you're having a hard time, you're feeling overwhelmed. It could be that you're having a hard time making decisions and you say, I don't know if I want to read this chapter. I don't know if I want to study this, or etc. You're not really motivated to study, right? You're not really able to prioritize assignments. You have a 5-point quiz versus a 50-point essay, and you don't know which one to do, and it's really hard. Anything becomes difficult to make decisions about. You don't really want to participate in the discussion or reply to your teacher or even like study. Who cares about the French Revolution right now? The brain is saying. You don't want to manage, you don't know how to manage your time. And then it becomes really difficult not quitting, because quitting is something easy. And so the brain's like, I should just quit, right? And so the temptation to quit becomes really high when we are under traumatic stress. And so what I want to say is, if you're experiencing any of the things we said, I want to say that, well, first of all, congratulations, your physiology is working, because you're having a normal reaction to an abnormal event. Okay? A global pandemic is abnormal. Our bodies are not used to handling or understanding, rather. Our brains are not equipped to understand what is happening, and so it's having to fill in a lot of gaps, and that's what is happening right now. And so what I want to go over right now is, I want to go over, okay, so we know this is happening. What are some of the things we could do to regulate our emotions and to help us continue to learn? But before I go any further, I want to ask if there are any pressing questions that I should address before we go further.
I do not see any just yet.
Perfect. And again, if you have any questions, you could enter them into the chat and we will address them. Okay, so I'm going to give you a list of things that, when I experienced trauma in the past or traumatic stress, I've used and they've worked for me. Some of them will work for you, others will not. And the take-home message is what? The take-home message is that your brain is scared right now. And what we want to do, we want to reassure the brain that there is not immediate threat to life. And we want to reassure the brain that it is loved, it is connected, it is going to be difficult, but it's going to be okay. So I have 6 points that I'll go over. So first of all, you want to recognize your discomfort, right? I'm having tightness in my chest. I'm paying attention to it. I'm recognizing that I have some discomfort. And then I don't pass judgment on that discomfort. What I want to do is investigate without any judgment. And instead of saying, oh, I have tightness in my chest and therefore I am this or that, you just say, I wonder what's happening. And this I wonder what's happening is gonna lead us to try to understand, right? And so understand the source of fear and the anxiety that you're experiencing. Then you want to negotiate with your brain. And the brain, like I said, I tell my family, my students, I say the brain is like a child, right? And when it's scared, it's not happy, right? It's scared, it's not happy. So you want to negotiate with the brain and tell the brain that there is no immediate threat, there is no monster underneath the bed, right? And we're going to do that by reactivating positive thoughts and memories, and then also creating. And so the brain really loves when it creates and when it can imagine, right? So the way this is going to look, we're going to see an action item. So I'm going to say recognize, and I'll give a description. Then I'm going to give few tips, tip number 1, tip number 2, tip number 3. And then in blue, I'm going to say, and the key to accomplish number 1 is this. So this will be the format that we will follow. So what we have an opportunity to really learn about ourselves, right? Why am I scared? So I say, hello me, hello myself. When I'm feeling anxious, it is almost always because I'm scared. I'm scared about something. I'm scared about being lonely, or I'm scared about not being in control, right? And so we want to look at this. I want to invite you to look at this from the lens of a scientist, right? So again, don't judge yourself. Pay attention to what's happening. Investigate why. Understand your feelings, and then negotiate with the brain. So let's begin. So I said that the first one is recognize. And you want to recognize, let's say you were somebody from the outside observing yourself. What do you notice, right? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Or are you scared? Are you irritable? Do you have a hard time getting out of bed? Do you feel a sense of apathy? Is there tension in your chest or in your neck? I know that when I feel overwhelmed, my neck becomes really stiff. I can't even turn it. And what I've noticed is the minute I feel my neck stiff, I think, oh, I'm anxious about something. I wonder what that something is, right? Are you sleepy all the time? And so again, the important part here is to pay attention to your body, to your behavior, to your thought. And I'm inviting you to journal about this, right? To journal, and you could share what's happening with your roommates, with your family, with your teachers, with your classmates, if you feel comfortable, right? So one of my sisters, when she's having anxiety attacks, she shares it with me, and we talk about it. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm a good listener. And when you're able to really, when you're able to hear yourself talk about some of your feelings, this is part of the understanding and part of the negotiating with the brain. So now that you recognize that, let's say you're having tightness in your chest, or you are having what seems like a panic attack, what you could do next is really critical that you don't judge. And so investigate it. Just say, I wonder what's going on. I wonder why I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning every day. And it's important that you pass no judgment. You don't judge your body, you don't judge your behavior, you don't judge your thoughts. And again, continue to journal. The reason I say it's really important that you don't judge, because you really want to get to the source of that fear and that anxiety. And if you judge, you're going to, in a way, block yourself from going further. Okay? And so if I'm having tightness in my chest, or if I'm having a panic attack, instead of saying, "Oh, I'm an emotional wreck and I can't even process anything," and all of these judgmental statements that really prevents me from understanding, I'm going to say, "I'm having tightness in my chest and I'm having a hard time sleeping and I don't know what's going on. I wonder what's going on." It really opens the gate for us to understand the source of that feeling and anxiety and discomfort. So let's try to understand. So you're going to understand by really asking yourself, is this normal or a typical reaction? What's happening to me right now? I didn't used to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning every night and not be able to go to sleep, but now I am. I didn't used to have anxiety, but now I do. I used to laugh and now I don't. Are these normal reactions? And what we want to say to you is whatever you're feeling right now, whatever it is that you're feeling right now, it is normal, right? It is, again, your body trying to process, the impact, immediate and long-term impact of a global pandemic. And so it's likely that your brain is scared, and it's scared because it's worried about its survival, right? So you are afraid. Now, the question is, why are you afraid, and what can you do about it? And what is it that you are afraid of? And so when I sit down and I think about and I've talked to some people, students and teachers, trying to examine the source of the anxiety and the fear, those are some of the things that we are experiencing. Loneliness. We are social creatures. We are not supposed to be socially distant. It's weighing heavy on us that we're having to do social distancing. As a matter of fact, our bodies are used to seeing people and hugging and just being in the presence of others, and all of a sudden we are not, right? And we don't have a choice in this. So this loneliness, right, is something that is very real. Financial insecurity. Even if you didn't lose a job, you are seeing your fellow human beings losing their jobs, and it's really devastating. And you are wondering, and perhaps even your brain subconsciously is wondering, what does this mean for me? What does this mean? Am I going to lose my job? And if you did lose your job, it can be really traumatic. You know, what does that mean in terms of, can I pay my cell phone bills or my mortgage, or can I support my family? A lot of us are worried about loss, and loss could be losing a loved one, or even losing our way of life, losing what is normal, worrying about others. And here I want to take a moment to say that worrying about others is something actually beautiful, that we're seeing a lot of people feel this empathy, this really enormous, beautiful quality that we humans have. We feel that the pain of people in Italy or in Spain or in Louisiana. And so this is something, how can we take this and actually turn it into something positive? Worrying about our own health, right? And so those are, again, all really important, and we want to understand what is the source of all of them. And the source of all of them really is that we have this innate desire to connect, right? We want to connect with a sense of purpose. So we go to school and we get a job that we want to like, and we want to help our family and help others. Loneliness, we want to connect with other people. Loss, we're going to lose something that we feel connected to, whether it is our normal routine in society or whether it is family members and so on. And what I want to say to you is, this is a time, right, that we want to build on those connections and foster relationships. And so here, Lawrence Kushner, who's a teacher, he's a mystic, he talks about connection and how connections are related to meaning. And meaning is primarily a matter of relationship. That if something is connected to absolutely nothing, symbolically, linguistically, physically, psychologically, it is meaningless. And in the same way, if something is connected to everything and everyone, it would be supremely meaningful. And so my take-home message to you is, a lot of the anxiety and the fear and the loneliness is coming out of your body and your brain's desire to connect. So what can you do to connect? And we're going to talk about it in the next couple of tips, right? How can you foster relationships that you have right now, nourish those relationships, but also forge new relationships? So let's talk about the brain then. In a way, I said to you, the brain is like a child, and that child is really scared. So how are you going to deal with that child? The way you deal with the child that's scared, you don't just become very super rational and say, well, let's talk about this mathematical formula. It doesn't work because it is the limbic system that's active right now. A lot of us are in this fight or flight. What does work is you negotiate, you give, you empower the child, you distract the child, you reassure, you repeat with kindness. And so let's go over this. So you want to negotiate. And what we're trying to do is we want to get out of the sympathetic, this fight or flight, right? And we want to go into the parasympathetic. And so what we want to say is we want to remind our brains that what I'm going through is stress. It is stress that's normal, but it's not an immediate threat to life, right? And that is going to help us activate our parasympathetic nervous system. And so another ways to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, those are just some of the ways, is that breathing, right? And you don't have to go to a yoga class. You don't have to sign up to become a certified meditation teacher. Just focus on your breathing. When you go into this anxiety where you feel like your life is ending, just pause, right? And you could try it right now. If you sit down and you take your pulse, just count how many beats per minute there are. And then what you do is you take that number and then you focus on your breathing. And for a few minutes, you just breathe, take a deep breath in, you hold it, and then sigh, you breathe out like. And you do that for a few minutes, and then you go back and you take your pulse. You'll see that your pulse goes down, right? And so that's activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is associated with a relaxed state. It's associated with our ability to digest and to rest. Walking is really important. A lot of people I've been talking to is they say how much they miss the gym and they're going crazy and they have all this energy. So go for a walk, and you don't need to have a gym, and you don't need to walk a certain pace. So what I've been doing is just at the end of the day, before it gets dark, I just go and I do 3 rounds around my block, right? One of my sisters, she doesn't live in a house, and so she just goes to the parking lot and she walks around the parking lot of her apartment complex. Laughing is really important. It's really this powerful tool that helps our brain release endogenous endorphins. Those are chemicals that help us relax. And so make it a habit of watching something on YouTube that makes you laugh, whatever it is, right? It could be dogs barking, or it could be kids fighting, or whatever it is that makes you laugh. I would make it a routine where you either watch it before you go to bed or in the morning, something that enables you to release endorphins. Gardening is so important. And so in the West African healing tradition, what they do when there is a patient that is sick, and especially when the illness has to do with when it's a mental illness, one of the first things they do is they have the person with the healer walk barefoot outside. And the idea here is to connect to the ground. And so touch the ground. If you can't garden, touch the ground. And what one of my teachers in Senegal, what he says is that it reminds you that you're standing on a firm ground, that you are grounded, right? And so I want to encourage you again to connect to the earth, touch the ground when you feel like, when you just can't take it and you feel overwhelmed. Encourage you to do that. So self-care is more important than ever, right? Some of you are caring for your children and your parents, and some of you are also taking classes at the same time and perhaps working or perhaps lost your job. Right now, you have to invest in your well-being, right? And so we talked about some of these things. You want to focus on your breathing, you want to walk, you want to laugh. And in addition to that, you don't need to watch the news all the time. And so reduce your news consumption and screen time. And so one of the things I noticed is that I was watching the news all the time. Every morning, I want to see what's happening in Italy, what's happening in Spain, what's happening to the stock market. And I realized that it was making me so anxious that I was physically getting sick, right? And not just because the news is negative, but it's also I have no power over the news. So then I came up with a plan. I can't quite 100% give up the news, but I don't want to be watching it and glued to the TV or my phone all the time. So I have a friend I call every day, 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening, and I say, what's in the news today? And he distills it down for me. He says, well, the stock market's still bad, and the death rate is still up. And then he'll throw in there something funny about, just something funny that happened in the news. And so my brain is still getting the news, but not at the rate that I was becoming indulgent that was really becoming negative. And so again, we are encouraging you to reduce your news consumption. How is your sleep hygiene? How are you sleeping, right? And so I had a teacher that would have us keep a sleep journal. What time am I going to bed? How much light was I exposed to before? And so let's say if I go to bed at 9 o'clock, how much light was I seeing, and especially screen light, was I seeing before 9 o'clock? If every light in the house is lit, then I noticed that it's gonna really, my sleep wasn't very deep. I couldn't go to sleep because my brain thinks it's still daylight, right? And so my teacher would have us keep these journals, sleep journals. And then she would say, okay, well, what can you do about it? And what I notice is that, let's say, again, I go to sleep at 9 o'clock. If I dim the light in the house, starting at 8 o'clock, it really helps me fall asleep, right? And so I started paying attention to, how's my bed? Is it comfortable? Is it, so those are things that you could do to up your sleep hygiene, if you will. How is your diet? We know that some people have lost their jobs and they don't have money for groceries. Are you eating healthy? Are you eating enough, right? And so we're going to talk about the food banks and how you can get help with your groceries. Are you eating too much? I know that for in the beginning, when the quarantine started, I was eating a lot, right? And I was eating a lot that was a lot of junk food. And I noticed that I was always very hyperactive, right? And so I had to curb the junk food that I was eating so I could reduce my blood sugar. It's really important to shower, right? So just because we are not going outside, we should not neglect that. My brother-in-law gets up in the morning, showers, puts on clothes as if he is going to work, right? And then he just sits and works on the computer. And don't trivialize this, because again, you're trying to keep a routine and tell your body that it's gonna be okay. So what your body is used to is showering, getting dressed, and so you're trying to maintain some normalcy there. The important part for negotiating is that you repeat, because the brain, again, is going to default to all the unknowns and it's going to try to solve all of the questions that you have. And so keep repeating these activities that I'm encouraging, and keep telling yourself, telling your brain it's going to be okay. Reassure it that it's not an immediate threat, and do so with kindness. All right, so One other thing to help with this negotiating with the brain is that what you want to do is distract and reactivate, right? So you want to occupy your thoughts with something else. Don't focus. This is why I was saying don't focus on the news, don't focus on the negative. What matters to you, right? And this is really important because sometimes when we are caught, when we're in the middle of a trauma or a drama, we lose sight of our sense of purpose. Why did I sign up to take these classes? Or why am I working? Or why? And so sometimes when I work with people who are feeling overwhelmed, what I say to them is, why did you become a nurse to begin with? Or why did you become a teacher to begin with, right? Go back to the reason. And that reason, did it change? Most of the time, no, right? And so why did you sign up to take courses? Well, some of you sign up to take courses because you love learning. That hasn't changed. Because you want to go to nursing school, or because you want to become a teacher. You know, ask yourself, does that still matter to you? The reason this is important because it offers an anchor for you to hold on to, right? It gives you a sense of control that internally you are still you and you still have a purpose, and that purpose is really important. So you want to hold on to that one. If you're taking classes, ask yourself, what is the one thing in this class that I felt incredibly excited about, right? And let's say you've studied, I don't know, 7 chapters, but chapter number 3 was so exciting that you were actually disappointed when the chapter ended. Go back and read that chapter. The reason for that is you already formed neuronal connection in the brain related to that chapter. What you want to do is reactivate them. That's something positive. That's something healthy for the brain. That's why kids, when they watch family pictures, it's actually really good. It's very healthy for the brain, right? Because what they're remembering, they remember a vacation when they were in that vacation and they went to Disneyland or they went to Disney World. And it really, it causes the brain to release dopamine and endorphins and so on. What are the things you can control in your environment right now, right? And news consumptions is one of them. There are a lot. It seems like we lost a lot of control, and we did, but there are a lot of things that we could still control. And it's really important. We know that people that have, that are successful in their jobs or in schools, what brain imaging shows is that those people, when you give them options and one of them they have no control over and the other one they do, they focus on things that they can control. And the good thing is we could teach ourselves to focus on the things that we can control. Importantly, it's really important. There is a Persian poet who says, stay close to the things that make you glad to be alive. And right now, what makes you happy that you are alive? Perhaps it's, you know, the fact that you have teachers that care about you. You have classmates that care about you. Perhaps it's your sense of purpose that you want to help people. Perhaps it is your children or your family. Perhaps it's your ability to go outside and listen to the birds, and that makes you happy. And if that makes you happy, it's really important to hold on to it. All of these things are, in a way, those are positive prescription for the brain. Document beautiful moments in your life. What are you grateful for right now? And it's really important to have lots of strategies. When I was a student in graduate school and I was going through some traumatic experiences, I would pay attention to what made me happy. And one time I remember just eating a piece of cheesecake and I felt happy. And so I wrote it down. And I made a list of the things that make me happy. And so the next time I experienced drama, right, guess what? I went and I made sure that I got cheesecake. And then finally, we want to share with you that, as I said, the brain is incredible. It does so well when you allow it to be creative, and when you don't put any limitations, and when you allow it to imagine, right? And so here I want to offer you, you want to imagine the future with you in it, and you not just imagine the future with you in it. You want to articulate to yourself, perhaps write it on a piece of paper or stand before the mirror and tell yourself why it matters that you are in it. Because you're not here by accident, right? And we depend on each other. Maya Angelou says that she's counting on others, counting on her, and that's why she keeps going. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing. But it's really important that we articulate to ourselves that even if I lose a job, even if I lost my my course or whatever, I am still here, and that is not an accident. I matter. I matter that I'm in the future because I contribute to society. And you want to imagine a better world, and what does that look like? As I said, our brains love to create. And here I want to say, be courageous and audacious. There's a poet that says, you're not a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in a drop. And that's really, really important to keep reminding yourself of that message, that, that you are the entire ocean in a drop. And so with that, I want to pause. I want to see if there are any questions. And then my colleague is going to go over free, local, and national resources to help you. So Jackie, are there any questions?
No, we do not have any right now.
Okay. And so again, we encourage you, if you have any questions, you could type them. Or perhaps we will, I'll stick around and I'll try to answer some questions. And so can we go on to the next part?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. All right. It's all yours.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Before I start talking, I'm going to take a deep breath right now. And the reason why I'm doing that, because it does relax me. And I got to tell you a little bit about me. I'm a counselor here, and I've been working with many students that have been going through a lot of things right now. And when I did the presentation yesterday, I was really kind of going at it with a little gusto, because I really felt important that everybody knew that there were resources out there, and I was really trying to appeal to their, their willingness, to, or I really wanted the students to go out and really use the resources if needed. But then I do also realize that there's a lot of students that are handling the stress in different ways, and actually they are coping with things because they are really addressing it step at a time. But for those who might want some additional resources, I want to cover them for you. Next slide, please. So one thing about this whole pandemic is that I do see people coming together. And as May said earlier, we all need somebody. And we do at times need someone to give us a little hand. So I want to tell you about resources that are available to give you a helping hand. Because as you start thinking about the things that you're needing help with, and those challenges are getting resolved, you're going to feel a little bit more peace and balance in your life. So what I want to talk to you about is the Student Wellness and Assistance Program. The reason why I like this one is because you have an opportunity to do some, self-research on your own. You get to hear about resources about healthy eating. You get to see resources about if you're feeling down or depressed, what kind of things you can do to feel a little bit more energized and involved and engaged. So I like this because it has nice resources, it has videos, but it also has a 24-hour resource where you can call for free because you're a Pima student. You can call this number, and what they're going to do is, with this number, is that they're going to talk to you. They're going to find out what you need. They're going to connect you to the person. This can be done virtually. And I'm excited about this because you get to say what's on your mind, and somebody's listening to you, and that's having somebody, having somebody you can bounce your thoughts to is a wonderful thing. So I would recommend the Student Wellness and Assistance Program. Now, of course, some of the things that are getting people down are the finances. They're losing their jobs. They're trying to stretch their dollars because they're working part-time. So I want to kind of alert you to the Arizona Department of Economic Security. The reason why I like that is because they have resources where you can have money for food. You can get resources like emergency funds. You can, maybe unemployment benefits. So you might want to check with the Arizona Department of Security in order to help you with your funding. Another thing is, Mace talked about loneliness, and yes, we're here in the house and all of us are dealing with this in different ways, and some of us are new to town and we're not really connected. So maybe we want to find a way to get connected. So we might want to look at some of the community agencies and really connect with some of the groups that we feel akin to, and maybe provide some assistance for somebody else in need, and sometimes that helps. Sometimes giving back seems to make you feel a little bit more connected. Maybe you're going to need some of these resources that are out there. So there is a COVID-19 resource that people will be able to send information to you on, and you can look at those resources. Next slide, please. Okay. All right. So you don't have to sit around alone, really contemplating the different emotions you might be experiencing as a result of this. What I do like about Maze's approach is that you get to kind of do some self-analysis, self-investigation, which is helpful. And some of the things like walking outside, taking a journal, writing in a journal, really getting to the heart of really discovering what is normal and not normal. That is a wonderful thing. But sometimes there are external resources that you're going to need in order to move things along for you. So when it comes to academics at Pima, maybe it's a technology issue. Well, you have on D2L the opportunity to get help with any technological resource that you have. Like, we know that there's some students that this is all new, taking online classes, and maybe they're feeling a level of stress because of that. Well, I want to let you know that right on your D2L shell, there's resources for you to help with those problems. Now, maybe it has to do with food again. So we have the community food bank. They're out there. They have healthy foods, So when Maze was talking about eating healthy and well, yes, get the fruits and vegetables, get those fibers, get those things that you need that's going to give you the energy to really cope with the things that are going on. Now, there are people that are at home and they have a lot of different medical things going on. Maybe they're not able to get their medications because it's part-time. Maybe things have changed in terms of their insurance. It's not supposed to. But if it did happen, you might need some discount medication. And I want to let you know about some resources for that as well. So again, that 24-hour Student Wellness Assistance Program is one resource. I'm going to talk about another resource that's 24/7. But if you can look on the screen here, there's all kinds of resources that can give you facts about coronavirus. And there's also resources that can give you some medical support. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, everybody deals with things in different ways. So, I haven't asked you, I looked at the chat and originally, and I really wanted to get a sense of where you're feeling. And some of you were saying that you felt like, you're worried for other people. I'm worried for other people too. And as a counselor, I take that on every day. And I'm really worried about people because it really stresses me to see other people stressed. But for my students, I would love them to speak to somebody should they need it. And so we have the crisis line, another 24/7, okay? Because sometimes when people are dealing with things, they feel like there are no options. They played it in their head and they're like, there's nothing else I can do about this. And sometimes it's helpful to get other ideas and other inputs and people thinking about things in different ways than even I do. I love hearing the feedback from other people. So you might want to consider calling this number, 741-741. It's a crisis number. And you would call, they're available 24/7. So listen to that, go call them if you need that. I would recommend it. I feel like reaching out to anything that's going to help you out is perfect. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, this crisis, this pandemic is a crisis that we are going through throughout the world. But as a result of this, this is one area that we're struggling with, but sometimes people have compounding grief. Like I have a friend who just lost her stepdad. And so there's people dealing with different things. Now, how do you address the grief and deal with the pandemic? So maybe some of this pandemic is triggering other things. So you might want to get involved with groups. You remember, being connected is so important. So you might want to get involved with this group, My Grief Angels. So I took a look at it, and I did look at the videos that they had available just to really understand, you know, the various ways that people grieve, and to understand the people who are surround you, and, you know, maybe be a part of a support group that you can hear how people are doing things and coping with things. I find that support groups very helpful. Oh, I really do. Next slide, please. Okay. All right. Now, remember I was talking to you about medications. That's so important, all right? So I would want you to give a try to this Needy Meds and see what you can do in terms of medications, discounts on medications. Take a look at that website, and it's listed on the top of the page. Next one, please. Okay. Now, as a community, we look out for each other, and I totally appreciate this. It's like, you know, a lot of us are putting our phones down. A lot of us are seeing our family members on a day-to-day basis. You know, it's usually your work buddies that you spend most time with, but now you get to really embrace and be around the people you care about. And maybe you can't see them on a day-to-day basis, but you are speaking to them virtually, you know, to group chats, that kind of thing. And sometimes you may be looking out for them, and they're seeming stuck. You know, they feel like they have no options. So there are options for people who feel like they're hopeless, and they don't want to get out of bed, and they don't want to do anything, and they're just feeling like life is just too hard. I want them, and you can actually refer some of your family members, and you yourself, I want you to talk to somebody in the national hotline. I'm saying you, but I really mean I want all of us to be able to use this resource. And if we are on the lookout and we see somebody that is going through some things, I want you to be able to pass this number on. It's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And what this lifeline is that life is valuable, and there are people that are struggling like us, and that there are resources out there to give us other avenues to think about some of the challenges that we're going through. So it's not hopeless, that we see other options and feel the willingness to be a part of it. So if you see somebody struggling, please dial 1-800-273-8255. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. And so before we take, if there are any questions, I want to end with this, and it's again Dr. Maya Angelou, who says that fear and hope cannot occupy the same space. Invite one to stay. And so I want to invite you to invite hope into your heart and into your mind. And I want to also say that hope is not passive. Hope is an active, it's a verb, and it is for all of us to really hope for a better humanity, for a better future for ourselves and for our fellow human beings. And with that, I'm going to stop. Again, thank you for joining us on Saturday morning. I already think that you're doing the right thing, because you're investing in your health, and you are going to help your family. You're going to help your friends. And so we'll take any questions that you have. And actually the last slide I'm going to show is right here. This is our contact information. Please feel free to contact us. When I email these slides and the recording, I'm also going to include a list of Pima Community College counselor, along with their email and phone numbers that you could contact them.
Maze, I think the only question we have was answered, but I think it could be shared to everyone else too. So a recommendation for struggling with insomnia and panic attacks as they're overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I want to share with you that I never really experienced insomnia. And when this happened, I noticed that every single night I would wake up between 3 and 3:30, and I would have this heaviness on my chest. And I am a neuroscientist. I understand the brain. I understand stress and physiology. I research that. And I couldn't understand like this heaviness every single day. And it was really overwhelming until what I decided to do to reach out to a counselor to see what was going on. And as I was telling the counselor what was happening, as I was talking about it, I thought, oh my goodness, I am having a traumatic experience and my body is reacting to it. And it's just reacting in a way that is waking me up in the middle of the night. My body is scared, my mind is scared. And the minute I understood what was happening, then I was able to do things. And again, I spoke with a counselor to help me um, relax in a way. And this is difficult. No, we can't sugarcoat it. But there are also tools that can help us deal with it. The human brain is resilient at adapting and at being innovative, and same as the human body. And so I encourage you to reach out to one of the counselors. Perhaps you could reach out to Delisa right here, whose email is on the screen.
Thank you. And one more question. When they receive the presentation for today, can they share it with their friends?
Absolutely. Everything is anonymous, so your name is not going to show, nothing's going to show, so you could share it with your friends, yesterday one of the participants had her daughter sit and watch the presentation with us, and that's perfectly fine.
And that's all the questions.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for being here with us on a Saturday morning. I hope that we answered your questions and that this was valuable to you. And I'm going to stop the recording right now.